Welcome to a deep dive, into these massive online worlds that everybody seems to be talking about, MMORPGs. We're going to dig into the history of those games where you can be a mighty wizard or a fearless warrior, crafting epic gear and battling, like you said, legendary creatures. And, what's really cool about this deep dive is that you've supplied, like, a dragon's hoard of research material for us. Articles, books, forum posts. I mean, we're talking a treasure trove of information about MMORPG history. So we're going way back to the beginning, before, fancy graphics, before intricate quests like we have today. Back to a time when it was all about text and imagination and a whole lot of typing.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about those early text-based games,
Mhm.
the ancestors of the MMORPGs that we know and love today. Multi-user dungeons, or MUDs for short.
MUDs, huh? Sounds kind of primal, doesn't it? Like digital cave drawings or something. So, like, paint me a picture here. What was it actually like to play one of these early MUDs?
Okay, so imagine this. You've logged onto a computer system, maybe a university mainframe, because it's way back,
Mm.
and you're staring at a screen, and it's filled with lines of code, and you have to type commands to do anything.
Yeah.
Move, fight, talk to other players, even just to look around.
Wow, talk about a learning curve. No fancy tutorials back then, huh?
Yeah.
It's amazing to think that people were drawn to that, though. What was the appeal?
Well, you see, even with all those limitations, even with the lack of graphics, the MEDs, they tapped into something really fundamental. They were essentially digital versions of tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons.
Mhm.
Players could create characters, they could explore these worlds, they could go on adventures together. It was all about social interaction, collaboration, the thrill of, co-creating stories in real time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even without the visual spectacle, it's that shared experience that really resonates with people. It's like those late night D&D sessions with friends, huddled around a table but in a digital space. But with all those players running around in these virtual worlds, I imagine there must have been a real mix of personalities and playstyles.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And this is where it gets really interesting. You see a researcher named Richard Bartle. He noticed these different player types emerging in MUDs, and he came up with a model to try to categorize them. Bartle's player types, he called it. And it identified four main types: achievers, explorers, socializers, and killers.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break those down for me. What makes each of those player types tick?
All right, so achievers, as the name suggests, are driven by progression. They're the ones who live for leveling up their characters, acquiring powerful gear, topping those leaderboards. Explorers, on the other hand, they're all about uncovering the secrets of the game world. They want to explore every nook and cranny, discover hidden areas, piece together the lore.
So it's like some people crave the destination and others are hooked on the journey. What about those other two types you mentioned?
Right, so socializers, they're all about connecting with other players. They thrive on the social aspect, whether it's chatting, forming guilds, or just, hanging out in the virtual world. And then you have the killers. They're driven by competition. And, well, as you might guess, they enjoy besting other players, often in a very dramatic fashion.
It's fascinating how these types, even though they were first identified in those early MUDs, they still resonate today in modern MMORPGs.
Absolutely. Bartle's model, it really highlights those diverse motivations that draw people to these virtual worlds and how those motivations often mirror our real-life personalities and desires.
It really does make you think, like, why are we drawn to these games? I mean, what kind of player are you? Me personally, I've always been a bit of an explorer. Give me like a sprawling map full of hidden paths, ancient ruins, that kind of thing. I'm there. But speaking of maps, those early MUDs, they're text-based worlds. It all sounds so abstract. When did things start to change? When did graphics enter the picture?
Ah, yes, the dawn of graphical worlds, a real turning point. One of the early pioneers in this transition was a game called Habitat, released back in 1986. Now, graphically, it wasn't, exactly what we'd consider cutting edge today, but it introduced something revolutionary: avatars.
Avatars. So no longer just a name in the void, you could actually see yourself, or at least a representation of yourself, moving around in the game world. That must have been mind-blowing at the time.
It was huge. Suddenly, these digital worlds, they felt more tangible, more real. Players could customize their avatars, express themselves, visually interact with others in a more engaging way. It really paved the way for the immersive experiences we have today.
And I bet those early avatars were, how do I put this, creatively designed. I can only imagine what people came up with given those limited graphics.
Oh, I'm sure there were some interesting choices. But then in 1991, a game called Neverwinter Nights came along. And that really pushed graphical elements to the forefront, still deeply rooted in that D&D inspired gameplay, but with visuals that really drew people in. Plus, getting picked up by AOL, that was huge for bringing it to a wider audience.
AOL, huh? Talk about a blast from the past. Back then, that was the way to connect with people online. But it wasn't just about, getting the word out. Game developers were really starting to push the boundaries of what was possible, weren't they?
Absolutely. We saw the rise of 2D isometric games like Ultima Online and Lineage with their top-down perspectives and surprisingly detailed worlds. And then, of course, came the leap to 3D graphics with games like EverQuest. That was a game changer.
EverQuest. That name is legendary. I remember hearing stories about it even if I didn't play it myself. It felt like the moment MMORPGs stepped onto the main stage. But what was it about EverQuest that made it so special, so influential?
Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of factors that came together in just the right way. It took those core elements that had been brewing in earlier games,
Mm.
classes, quests, the fantasy setting, and it refined them.
Right.
Suddenly, you weren't just dipping your toes into a digital world. You were diving headfirst into a persistent world that felt truly alive.
Persistent worlds, that's that idea that the game keeps running even when you log off, right? Like the adventures continue even when you're not there.
Exactly. It seems like such a given now, but that was huge. It meant that your actions had lasting consequences. You could log off, go about your day, and when you came back, the world would have shifted and changed based on your choices and the choices of other players.
Hmm.
It created a whole new level of investment. And EverQuest also really nailed the class system, solidifying those archetypes, the warrior, the mage, the rogue, in a way that really resonated with players.
It's like they cracked the code for translating those classic RPG roles into this new online format. It created this familiar framework, but within this massive evolving world. No wonder it captured people's imaginations. But all this innovation, this constantly evolving technology, it must have come with growing pains, right?
It did indeed. The rise of these graphical MMORPGs, it brought a whole new set of challenges, especially when it came to business models. You see, up until this point, it was all about finding ways to even access these games, sharing time on university mainframes, figuring out dial-up connections. But as the games became more complex, more demanding, a new question emerged. How do you fund the development and maintenance of these massive online worlds?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Creating these sprawling digital landscapes, keeping them running smoothly, it all takes resources. So how did developers tackle that challenge? Did they put like a toll booth on the path to adventure?
In a way, they did. That's when the subscription model really took hold.
Hmm.
Pay a monthly fee for the privilege of exploring Azeroth or battling your way through dungeons with your friends.
Ah, yes, the subscription fee. I remember that sparking some pretty heated debates back in the day. Was it a fair price for hundreds of hours of entertainment? Was it a necessary evil to support ongoing development? Or was it a barrier to entry for players who couldn't afford it? There were some strong opinions on all sides.
There were, and for good reason. It was a big shift in how we thought about games. But while those debates were raging on at Titan, emerged from the fray a game that would redefine the MMORPG landscape and become practically synonymous with the genre itself, World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft. Wow. It's almost a cliche to say it was a game changer because, well, it kind of was. What was it about WoW W that made it such a phenomenon? A cultural touchstone that even people who've never touched an MMORPG still recognize.
That's fascinating, isn't it? They managed to take everything that had come before, the persistent worlds, the classes, the raids, and they polished it to a shine. They understood what made these games tick, but more importantly, they understood how to create a world that felt truly alive. They built on the foundation of those earlier games, and they created something truly special.
And it wasn't just about the game mechanics, right? It was about the community, those social connections that form when you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. WoW W took the concept of guilds, which had been around since the early days of MUDs, and really amplified it. Guilds became more than just groups of players. They were family support systems, even sources of drama and intrigue. It was like the ultimate virtual water cooler, a place to forge bonds and share those epic tales of victory and defeat.
It's amazing how these digital worlds can foster such real, meaningful connections. But WoW W wasn't the only game making waves. There were others out there pushing the boundaries, exploring different models, challenging conventions.
But absolutely. Guild Wars, for example, decided to shake things up by offering a buy once, play forever model,
Yeah.
ditching the subscription fee entirely. It was a bold move, a different way of thinking about how to build and sustain a thriving online world.
Yeah, I can see how that would be appealing to a lot of players. But then you had EVE Online, which went in a whole other direction, a game notorious for its complexity, its steep learning curve, but also for its incredible depth and those player-driven narratives.
EVE Online is a fascinating beast. It's a sandbox game, meaning it gives you a set of tools and essentially says, go create your own destiny. It's a world where players form corporations, wage economic warfare, and engage in massive space battles with hundreds of ships on screen at once.
It's like a grand space opera, but unfolding in real time, shaped by the players themselves. And while all of this was happening, in the Western game development scene, a whole other wave of MMORPGs was emerging from the East, bringing their own unique flavors and innovations to the genre.
Absolutely. We saw the rise of wuxia games inspired by those fantastical Chinese martial arts stories, games like Age of Wushu and When I Played. And then there's the whole world of cute MMORPGs, games like Ragnarok Online and Maple Story, with their emphasis on social interaction, adorable aesthetics, and extensive character customization.
It's incredible how MMORPGs have become this truly global phenomenon reflecting different cultures, storytelling traditions, and gameplay preferences. And through it all, this one constant remains: that desire to connect, to explore, to escape into these shared digital spaces. It makes you wonder, where do we go from here? With VR and the metaverse on the horizon, how will MMORPGs continue to evolve? Will we see even more immersive worlds, deeper social connections, or perhaps entirely new ways of experiencing these online realms? That feels like something for you, dear listener, to ponder. We've journeyed from the text-based dungeons of MEDs to the sprawling worlds of today, and it's clear that the story of MMORPGs is far from over. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.